Hello friends, Matt Baum here. This ruling changes everything. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that the Constitution protects the freedom to marry for everyone, clearing a path to full national marriage equality. Here's the scene outside the Supreme Court when the ruling came down. This is a great time to celebrate. The ruling is a win-win for everyone. It's not like some couples won and other couples lost. What this decision means is that same-sex couples have the same right to marry as everyone else, and everyone else's right to marry isn't hurt at all. Everybody wins. So what happens next? The ruling takes effect right away, which means lower courts will just have to issue a little paperwork and then marriages can start very soon, if they haven't already. Of course, the fight for marriage equality is still far from over. Officials in various states have already said that they'll do whatever they can to make it difficult for same-sex couples to marry or have their licenses recognized. If this sounds familiar, it's because it's what some officials did in the 1950s when the Supreme Court ordered an end to segregated schools. Back then, some officials just closed schools altogether rather than integrate them. Arkansas Governor Orville Faubus called out the state National Guard to block black students from entering a high school in Little Rock. Florida declared the Supreme Court's ruling null and void. The governor of Alabama personally blocked a schoolhouse door, and when Medgar Evers sued Mississippi for failing to integrate its schools, he was shot at his home by a white supremacist. He later died after a segregated hospital, refused to admit him. His killer wasn't convicted until 1994. All of these efforts to block integration were illegal, particularly the murder. But the opponents of progress dragged out the process of integrating schools for decades, and it's possible that their modern-day equivalents will try to do the same. Various GOP presidential candidates say that they'll disregard a pro-equality ruling from the Supreme Court. North Carolina just passed a bill that would allow officials to opt out of providing a license to all couples, gay and straight. Numerous Republicans in Texas have voted to defy the Supreme Court. Alabama Chief Justice Roy Moore says that he's not bound by a Supreme Court ruling that grants the freedom to marry. And former House Majority Leader Tom DeLay encouraged people to defy the 10 justices of the Supreme Court. Clearly, this is a man who knows what he's talking about. But these folks just don't understand what's happening. Marriage equality is coming. There's no stopping it, and that's a good thing, because expanding the freedom to marry for same-sex couples makes this country stronger. After all, the Supreme Court's been laying the groundwork for this decision for 130 years, as far back as the 1880s. A few days before this ruling came out, I recorded a video about why the Constitution has always protected the freedom to marry. This history is why the court ruled the way they did. Hello, friends. I just borrowed this original copy of the U.S. Constitution so I could inspect it for marriage equality. I keep hearing this soundbite that there's no right to gay marriage in the Constitution, and that marriage equality is some brand new right that's just been invented. And it's true, I don't see the words gay marriage in here, but I don't see straight marriage either. So, does the Constitution protect marriage or not? Well, it's only fairly recently that gays and lesbians have been asking for marriage, but as it turns out, the U.S. Supreme Court's been preparing to rule on the subject for 130 years, and they've been using this document to do it. And the arc of history is very clear. In each case, they always expand access to marriage instead of restricting it. It started with a case in 1888, a basic land dispute between a husband and a wife, in which the court called marriage the most important relation in life, more than a mere contract, the foundation of the family and society. That set the stage for future rulings by saying that marriage is special. It deserves extra attention. What kind of extra attention? They didn't get around to that until 1923. That's when the Supreme Court ruled that the Due Process Clause, which is in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, protects various rights, like the right to learn, live, have kids, worship, and marry. In other words, for the first time, the court ruled that marriage is protected by the 14th Amendment. Not just for some people, but for everyone. Because that's how the 14th Amendment works. It makes sure all laws apply equally to everyone. So from this point on, marriage is attached to the Constitution. Throughout the 20th century, the court issued a string of rulings about marriage and family choices, from raising kids to getting a divorce. States kept trying to restrict marriage on the basis of race, or incarceration, or divorce, or inability to pay court costs. They tried to pass laws about who you could live with, or what medical care you could get if you were married. In every case, the Supreme Court turned to the 14th Amendment to reiterate, marriage and family are foundational rights protected by the Constitution. States can't withhold marriage from someone unless they have a very, very, very good reason. And in case after case after case, that reason just didn't exist. Of course, the big one was 1967's Loving v. Virginia. Until then, if you were married to someone of a different ethnicity, Some states could arrest you and send you to jail. Supporters of those laws claim that they were justified by religion or tradition, and that overturning them was an attack on religious freedom. That's crazy, and of course, nobody would try to use justification like that today. It's important to note that when the Supreme Court overturned laws that blocked people from getting married, they didn't say that there's a constitutional right to marriage just for prisoners, or just divorcees, or just for interracial couples. They said there's a fundamental right to marriage for everybody. Remember, that's what the 14th Amendment does. It applies all laws equally to all citizens. And since the 1920s, that's included marriage, even in situations the founders didn't expect. I point this out because obviously the same thing is happening now with marriage for same-sex couples. These couples don't seek a new right to gay marriage. They just want the fundamental right to marriage that everyone else has. That's why lawyers never use the phrase gay marriage, because from a legal perspective, it's just nonsense. To a court of law, under the 14th Amendment, marriage is marriage, whether you're gay or straight or remarried or interracial or whatever. For nearly 130 years, the Supreme Court has defended marriage as a fundamental right. They protected access to marriage for women, for the poor, for interracial couples, for the incarcerated, for the divorced. And why? Because as the court wrote over a century ago, forming a bond with the person of your choosing is the most important relation in life. It is embedded in the foundation of the country. Not just for some of us, for all of us. So the idea that same-sex couples should be included really isn't all that new. It's been in the Constitution this whole time. The Constitution's just been waiting for us to catch up to it. I just want to emphasize that nobody has lost today, even the people who think that they've lost. Affirming the constitutional guarantees of due process and equal protection is a victory for everyone and harms no one. Same-sex couples won today, but it's also a win for freedom, for equality, and for the U.S. Constitution. It's been a long time coming. For over a century, this country's been affirming access to marriage, expanding freedom for all people, and growing into a better society. And sometimes that growing process can be messy. There's likely to be a backlash for a while against this ruling, but we can handle it. Remember, we got this far by talking about why marriage matters, being visible, and simply living our lives, falling in love, making a commitment, forming families. That's never going to change. Now is a great time to celebrate, whether you've supported marriage equality for years, just come around, or still have a ways to go. With this ruling, we've all won, and we can all celebrate together. Thanks for watching. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's ruling and on marriage equality. You can subscribe on YouTube or get in touch at Matt Baum on Twitter. And if you're enjoying my videos, you might also like my other project, The Sewers of Paris. That's a podcast full of revealing stories about how entertainment has changed the lives of gay men. You can head over to sewersofparis.com to listen and subscribe.